everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin. I am your host, Olivia Atkin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We will give you real life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top notch guests. Today, we are speaking with Jeff Harnois. Jeff is the founder and principal coach of iBridge, an organizational transformation firm dedicated to enabling leaders and teams to perform at their highest levels. Over the years, Jeff has partnered with executives across Fortune 50 organizations and other mid-sized to large companies to drive large-scale transformation, elevate leadership capability, and strengthen team cohesion. Known for his ability to bridge mindset, behavior, and performance, Jeff has built a reputation for turning leadership theory into measurable business impact. His path to the C-suite and ultimately founding iBridge in 2017 reflects both strategic insight and personal grit. Beginning as an individual contributor, Jeff advanced through leadership roles in several Fortune 50 companies, including a decade at Apple before leading multiple startups and successful exits. As the first in his family to earn a college degree, completing both undergrad and graduate studies while working full time and raising a family, Jeff's story embodies perseverance and a deep understanding of growth within complex and high performing environments. In today's episode, we'll explore how Jeff's business has evolved since his last appearance, how his client partnerships have deepened and expanded, and what's next for iBridge and his work in advancing organizational performance. You can find Jeff by going to his website at ibridge.com. Hello, Jeff. It's fantastic having you on the show.
Olivia, it's fantastic to see you again.
I am so excited for this and welcome back. And let's begin where we always begin on the question of what does success mean and look like to you today? And how has that definition changed since we last talked in 2023?
Yeah, I think I'll go with the last part of that first, which is the definition of success for me and its change. The truth is, I don't think it has changed much in terms of the focus of that. And it really comes down to me. Success to me is defined as the ability to create value for my clients. When I achieve that with them, then I am successful. There's a direct relationship there between the two.
And I think that is also so important that a lot of time we overlook, right? We want to build, we want to grow, we want to make an impact, but there needs to be cohesion and there needs to be alignment. And, saying yes to everyone is not in alignment all the time with
Hmm.
what your goals is for the impact you want to make as well. Not
Hmm.
just organizationally, but personally as a business, what else what if I could talk, what you also want to be putting out there. You don't want to be always known as the company that can serve everyone if the impact you're trying to make does not serve everyone.
That's really well said. In fact, often when we meet prospects, organizations, or people that we're contemplating doing business with, we often begin that process by having a discovery conversation. And, the discovery is really focused on what problems are you trying to solve at the organizational level? And then the question is, do we have a remedy for that? Or do we have the capability of building a remedy for that? And if the answer is no, then we really want to sort of end the conversation there. We don't want to waste our time. We certainly don't want to waste their time, because obviously someday in the future they may come back because we do have the remedy for them. But to your point about saying no to those things that don't really fit in our center lane, that's a discipline that I think a lot of early stage companies really struggle with.
Oh yeah, I mean I did it for a while. I just was like, yeah, okay, we'll figure it out. Not in the sense of deliverables, in the sense of for me internally as I was building a business and wanting to grow, it was oh, you're not within what the price range is, okay,
Mhm.
we'll work it out, right? We'll do
Right.
this. That doesn't help me, my business, other things grow, be able to deliver the right way either. And
Yeah.
it took time learning that just saying yes to every client, could also be frustrating to me because then if you're not clear in alignment, they might not be happy with the results.
It goes,
And
it
then
go, yeah, sorry for the interruption. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about, my definition of success is the ability to create value for my client. If our priority is chasing revenue, right, and it's not chasing those types of clients where we can provide value, we've lost so much in that process. On the other hand, when we go the other way, when we do deliver value, what we find is a significant increase in customer loyalty. We see a significant increase in repeat engagements and ongoing business relationships with them. And then one of my favorites is we see our clients referring us to other potential clients. When you're chasing revenue, I think a lot of those things at a minimum are compromised, but often they're just taken off the table completely. So focusing on that value delivery, I think, is one of the keys for success.
and while you were saying that, I was also thinking of like that journey, right? That growth journey that a lot of entrepreneurs go through, and even I went through, is as you grow and as you're saying no, or you could be in a tight spot time of year, right? And
Yeah.
you get into the minds frame, if you're not careful, of money, money, money. What's the dollar coming in? How do I get that dollar? And to your point, like you said, you start to get into that frame of mind of looking at everyone, every potential client as a dollar amount. And if it doesn't work
Yeah.
out, it's on to the next. How can we bring the dollar in? So forth and so on. But what ends up happening is not only are you not attracting the right people you want to work with, but you're not attracting the other individuals either because they can feel, okay, they're only trying to get the money, they're trying to get that
Yeah,
money.
that's right.
And it sets this tone where, as you said, if you go people first, how can we impact first, how can we provide value, not only do people see that, they go, okay, I have to work with this person. Not only did they have the best experience, they saw value, they saw how much you went above and beyond.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, they start referring people. And now those pipelines
Yeah.
open up.
Yeah. And just to sort of tie that off, we're not chasing anyone anymore because we don't have to. And I absolutely understand, especially in the early days, having to put revenue points on the board. It's a matter of critical success. But I think you want to get out of that mode as fast as possible and get back in refocusing on, that value creation and value delivery. And then, since we're talking about this, I read a book, I guess maybe it was about 6 or 8 months ago. The name of the book is Getting Naked, and it's written by a guy named Patrick Lencioni. Some of your audience will probably know Lencioni from the Five Dysfunctions of a Team book that is now in its 20th year of publication. And the thesis of Getting Naked is really about, from a consulting standpoint, do you chase the business opportunity, right? Or do you approach the business opportunity from a value creation and delivery standpoint first? And it's a parable, like many of Lencioni's books are. In essentially, the main character in the book had to learn the lesson that you can sit down with a prospect and you can literally get into problem solving with them in real time. And that relationship development, in other words, you don't have to pay for my time up front. Let's do a little work together and see if we've got a good match here and see if I'm heading in the right direction. More importantly, let's see if I have value to add to your work. And again, client loyalty goes off the chart when you focus on things. The main character in the book learned that you can charge a premium when you approach value first versus revenue first.
And going back a little bit, since your last appearance, what has changed most in how you run iBridge and your approach or your offerings or how you partner with clients?
Yeah.
And why did those changes for you become necessary?
I love this question, Olivia, because I really love this story. A few years ago, just to sort of bring everyone back up to speed, I formed iBridged as an executive career coaching firm.
Mhm.
We had so much success in that space that we ended up turning off all of our outbound marketing. And even to this day, we are still referral only when it comes to that. But one-on-one coaching is not scalable. Um, at its basic level, it's exchanging time for money. And one of the limitations of scale is there's only a certain amount of time. There's only so many clients you can work with on a daily basis. And so I thought, gosh, we're creating really high trust relationships with our clients. They're typically in a leadership level role. What else can we do for them? And so I pivoted my company from career coaching into executive development. The idea was we're helping you get into these organizations, again, generally at leadership level roles. Can we help you succeed more quickly in that new role? And so iBridge partnered with a company called Wiley. Wiley is a $2.2 billion publishing firm, one of the oldest in the country. And we licensed some content, again, very focused on leadership development and team cohesion. And when I pivoted into that space, I was looking for engagement opportunities to do a workshop as an example. One of my strategies was my career clients would then introduce me to these enterprises. And that strategy has worked very well for us. In fact, almost all of our business comes from client referrals. And so our entire growth strategy has been leveraging the relationships we create and the value that we deliver for our clients to open up new business for us. Well, in one particular case, one of my clients, who was the director of recruiting, introduced me to the chief human resources officer. And as I spoke with her and talked through what our capabilities were, she said, "Yeah, we'll take 6 of those and we'll get assessments for 1,000 employees in our company." And it was such a transformational shift for me because I went in that moment, I went from thinking about selling an engagement to engaging an entire enterprise, an entire company. And so my scale, even though it was instinctive, I didn't know how big it could get. I just knew that doing one-on-one coaching wasn't going to get me there. And revenues essentially quadrupled on an annual basis as a result of that particular shift. And it that time was phenomenal. We were having really good success. Our clients were having really good success with us. Again, from a leadership standpoint, from a team cohesion standpoint, trickling down into things like cultural improvements and performance and output improvements. And at a higher level, at a human level, they were having significantly better relationships with the people that you spend a lot of time with. And then it occurred to me, we made that leap. What's the next leap? And the next leap is doing that same thing now at the institutional level. And so we have now pivoted into the organizational transformation space. We're still using the same tools and the same technique, but my growth strategy is now targeting a much higher level at a larger scale in the organizations that we target. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. And as you're saying this, like my brain's like, yep, yep, uh-huh, loving it, loving it. Because recently I had a conversation with someone about, you know, I've been growing my podcast consulting and achieving success overall, right? And this conversation of, okay, now getting it to that next level, that next goal within the next, year. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
serving as many people as possible and making it really personable, and really impactful, because that
Yeah.
is why I started this. And it's
Yeah.
very much from our previous conversations why you started that is, how do I do that and serve everyone and take it to the next level? And one of the things that got brought up is doing one-on-ones, doing groups is only going to take you so far.
Yeah.
There's only so many hours, and doing everything on a one-on-one basis, there's only so much room for growth in it at the end of the
Yeah.
day, right? Because there's only so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
uh, and so as you were saying that, I was like, yeah, because that's again that next thing of, how do you serve more people? What do we offer, and how can we offer it while bringing that same value to the table and
Yeah.
making no one feel like it's a less than service or this or that. So
Yeah.
and so that being said, you help leaders and teams close gaps between intention and execution. When you look back, what's a client transformation that surprised even you, and something that broke down your own assumptions about what's possible?
That is such a great question. One of the things that I think, because I understand what I'm about to say, has contributed to the success that we've done, which is no two teams are alike, no two leaders are alike. We can get clear. This is some of the language and modeling that we use in my business. We can get clear on what your current state is. We can get clear on what your desired state is. And that's usually the transformation that we're trying to make. Where are you today? Where would you like to be in the near future? And then also, when you get to that new desired state, what does that open up for you? Okay, so that modeling is generally fairly generic in every engagement that we go into. We want to understand what that gap is. Where are you today? Where would you like to be? But what you can't do is prescribe a generic remedy for that. And this is where the name iBridge, I think, really makes a lot of sense. We are building the bridges between where you are today and where you want to be, but no two bridges are the same. And so when I go into an organization, part of what makes what we do so stinking fun is that we have to understand what those differences are, what the psychological limitations are, what the physical limitations are, what the organization or internal political, limitations are, to be able to get them to that next level. And then we have to understand the capacity of our clients, and then we have to understand what's the resistance from a psychological. And so there's a lot of moving parts, and it's always really, really interesting. So I wanted to say that to set the foundation to answer your question. I don't know that there's that any one of those has surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that every one of them there's always a revelation or a revealing event, meaning we think we know what we're dealing with, we think we understand the problem, we think we understand the architecture for that bridge. And then as we start implementing, something comes up that we weren't expecting. And that happens 100% of the time. That's the nature of our business. So I can't say that there was any time that I was surprised. What I would say to you though is that I think a lot of my clients are surprised that they were actually able to make it on to that other side, to the desired state. I think a lot of my clients have skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
I come in, by the way, my personality type is very realistic. I'm a realist. I'm not overly optimistic. I'm not overly pessimistic. I'm very realistic. Like, I'm not too hyperbolic. We're gonna figure out what really can work. And so I'm really comfortable and confident in their ability to make the change. Many of them just aren't sure. And then when they get to the other side, they're like, wow, unbelievable. Didn't think it was possible. Had a lot of skepticism. It's like, cool. Now you're here. Where do we go next?
Well, and that being said, as you mentioned, bridging that gap, and no two bridges are the same. Bridging is baked into your brand. In your
Yeah.
experience, what separates the leaders who make that bridge successfully, which sounds like it's a lot who work with you, and that aligning the mindset, the emotional and behavior from those who get stuck and stay stuck? Are there early warning signs? Are there
Yes.
things to look for?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There are a couple of traits that will give us a really, I would call them predictors, right? Things that are behavioral or operational that will predict whether or not this organization or these people are going to be able to make the transformation. On a leadership level, it always comes down to what I call the impetus for change. Are you, do you have a personal stake in making this change? Are you the one driving it? And if you are, generally your ability, your resiliency, your adaptability, those things are generally high. On the other hand, if you're being told that you have to make this change, which sometimes happens, um, are you going to buy in? Right? If you're not willing to buy in, if you're not willing to do the work, we can generally see that pretty early. And then that actually then becomes the focus of what we're doing. Because at the end of the day, if we don't get that buy-in, our ability to be successful and the organization to be able to realize the change that they were looking for is completely compromised if the leader is stuck in that way. We don't have issues with intellectual capacity. We don't have issues with cycles and priorities. We work with all of that stuff. But if the person doesn't have if the leader doesn't have an impetus for change, we're DOA. We're dead on arrival.
So, how, when that comes up and those situations come up, how do you deal with that, to make it a simple question?
Yeah, we kind of set an expectation up front if it looks like we're going to have that kind of resistance. And then we have really, really direct conversations with the executive leadership to say, what options are on the table here? How critical is it to your business that this change take place? If the answer comes back that it's critical, it is a must get done kind of thing, and we do have those every once in a while, then they have to also be willing to make a change at that leadership level. And sometimes that's an intervention where, the leader that we're working with, their boss comes in and gives some nudging and some encouragement, up to and including a reorg, changing the org design.
And going back a little bit to a conversation we were having, growth always, it's very rare, does not come with complexity when it hits, when it's you working with, organizations and having those hard conversations, right? And setting expectations. As iBridge has also scaled while serving individuals in their own scale zone, how do you ensure that culture, quality, and coaching from your end and the depth of that don't get diluted? And what systems or guardrails have you put up to maintain that as you grow, as you change the business and who you're serving? Sometimes there's integrity that stays in place.
Again, that's just such a deep and rich question, Olivia. And here's why. One of the things that I've learned, and I'm guilty of this myself, younger entrepreneurs or newer entrepreneurs, again, are sort of chasing revenue versus chasing value. How do we make sure that we're delivering is we set the goals in advance. Here's the distinction. I'm not interested in selling you a product or a service. That's not my mindset. There was a time when that was my mindset. And in some ways, it was probably necessary for me to have that mindset for my business to survive. So I don't want this to sound like I'm putting it in a negative light. Again, I think there is a time and an appropriate place for that. But where we are today, we have to deliver value. If we're not delivering value, we're not doing our job. And so oftentimes what we do is we set specific goals and outcomes that are associated with the work. And then we check along the way to see if we're making progress towards those. It's something that isn't, we don't guess at it, and we're not too soft about it. We're pretty clear about what we want to achieve. And so we build in little check-ins to say, are we moving in the right direction? Are we moving at the right pace and cadence? Are we delivering enough forward progress for us to be on time for,
Mhm.
what it is that we're trying to get done? So that's one of I would call it more of an operational and a bit more of a strategic guardrail around how we're doing. On the people side of it, we created some technology. It's called the iBridge 180, which is basically a measurement instrument between the leader and the employee. And what we do is we pre-establish the criteria that we want to measure them against. The manager will rate that individual on a 5 scale. The individual will then rate themselves, and then we get to see where alignment exists and where the gaps are. And so we can pick those gaps. We can create a development plan as an example around that. And then we come back and we remeasure. It's like we said, these were your top 10 priorities. How are you doing? And
Mhm.
that's one of the ways that we focus on sort of the measurement component. But at the end of the day, and this is absolutely the key, did we get the behavioral change that we wanted? Did we get the leadership change that we wanted? Is the team performing at a higher level? When those things happen, we know that we've gotten it right. And when they don't happen, we know we're not done.
I love that because I think having deliverable, having expectations and marks and circle backs and those touch bases are really key in anything. Like, when we talk about podcasting, for example, because that's what I do. So the thing I could really tie to is people look at me after they've talked to other podcast consultants or will go in the avenue of like getting on podcasts. And I'm like, okay, you're definitely going to get on four top 1 to top 10%. Here's the timeline to expect. This is the process.
Yeah.
Here, there's along every step, there's a check, and there's always those checks and balances, and there's always here's the deliverable, here's the expectation, here's what will end up happening. And I'll get sometimes, how do you know? Like, how am I guaranteed for it? I'm like, what do you mean? Like to me, it's like my mindset is let's deliver, let's add value, let's make sure we're all on the same page on how this can end and how it will end. Where like people be like, well, other people have told me you pay a monthly fee and then they'll try and whatever happens, happens. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, right. It's those differentials. But for me, to your point of like, whenever I go to work with someone as a client, right, knowing that mindset, having that mindset, knowing the importance of it, I always go, okay, what's the deliverables? How are we getting from here
Yeah.
to point B? What are we walking away with? And when they stumble on that, that's when my red flags also go up.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think there's such a value and need in that. And it also goes back to transparency and communication.
Transparency, communication, expectation setting, discipline and managing deliverables. There's a lot there. One of the things that I would then, based on what you've said and reflecting my comments, one of the pieces of advice that I would give you for everyone is think of this as an opportunity for your next level up, which is to say, we can agree on what the deliverables are. So you're going to pay me a fee or whatever the financial structure is, and I'm going to deliver these things for you. The next level is, what did those things do for you, for your business? Did they help you succeed? Did they help you move? Did they help you hit your strategic goals? When you understand that, you understand your value proposition, right? And so it's like the question on my mind is, what difference did your work make for your client? When you can answer that, you understand what your value proposition is, and that's what you then should be selling. This is moving up from selling a product or a service into that value proposition modality. I have a parallel example here for you. Um, I launched my business, so I get solicited by marketing people, on a daily basis. Oh, we can help you with lead gen. We can put a lot of revenue in your pocket. And it's like, okay. Then you get on the phone with them, and what it turns out is they're actually just trying to sell a service. And I say, well, how do you measure your success? Well, number of outbound outreaches, and then how much engagement are we getting, and then how many click-throughs are we getting, and how many are going to the blog, and how many are going to the website. And I always say back to them the same thing. I don't care about any of that. I don't care about any of that. And more importantly, I'm not willing to pay you for that.
Mhm.
Here's what I am willing to pay you for. Get me some clients. That's now you're adding value to my business, and I want to pay you generously for that. I don't mind organizations that provide service, and I don't mind people who buy service. But again, I'm so deep on the deep end of the pool of creating value. I also want it for my own business. Yeah,
And that's the thing too of the perspective, right? If you want value in your business as a client to someone else in their business, why aren't you thinking about that same way, bottom down,
exactly right.
right? It goes back to the old saying, treat people the way you want to be treated. Treat your business the way you want other people to treat your business. Um,
So I
so
want to. I'm smiling and I'm laughing a little bit about that because a lot of the work that we do, Olivia, is around psychology and psychological profiles. And one of the things that I ask people often when I'm doing a workshop is I'll say, who knows what the golden rule is? And we see everybody's hand go up. And I'll ask someone to repeat it. Yeah, treat others how you want to be treated. And I said, well, what's better than that? What's better than the golden rule? Is there something better? And you see people looking around, and there's kind of a question. And I said, have you heard of the platinum rule? And people will sit back and they'll go, well, not really. The platinum rule is treat others not how you want to be treated, but how they want to be treated. And that's one of the things that we teach in the work that we do with DISC and with
mhm,
Myers-Briggs is helping you understand what is it that the people you're talking to, what do they need? That's what I'm looking for in a client engagement. I don't want to treat them how I want to be treated because that might not be what they want. I
mhm.
want to get clear on what they want and what they need and how they want it. And then I want to deliver at that, on that frequency.
And that being said, as I we talked about in your first interview in 2023, and now I brought it up again in your introduction. You were the first in your family to go to college,
Yeah.
and that still shows up in what you do and how you show up and deliver and expectations and in your conversations regularly. What parts of that identity still show up in your leadership today, and what parts have you released or redefined?
Another really, really good question, Olivia. And this is a little bit of a deep vein for me. In my mother's family, she had 12 brothers and sisters. So if you can just imagine, I want to give you the scale here. Each one of them having anywhere from 3 to 10 children each. So, my first level cousins on that side of the family they're in the hundreds. And then, thousands when we get into second level. So on a very personal level, being the first to go to college to me felt like I was setting a new paradigm. My family on that side were very, very hard workers. They were home builders and road builders. And so college was never a priority for them. And so by working through it and it changed a familial and a generational, there was a generational shift in my family, I think, because of it. And now I've got a whole bunch of cousins that have, gone to college at a minimum, and some of them have also gotten up into the graduate level. And so, on a personal front, I think that that was a really good thing. How it relates to my business, this may be a deeper and longer conversation. I will say this. One of the things very early in my graduate program, a professor said to the room, and it was profound for me, and it resonates with me today. He said, your entire career in education, from K all the way through bachelor's degree, is what we call barf education. And his definition of barf education was, we barf it out, you consume it, and you barf it back. We put information out and then we test to see if you remember it and then can recite it. At the graduate level, we are going to move away from that model completely. We're not interested in what you remember. We're interested in what you can do with what you're learning. We want you to contribute to the field of study or to the body of work. And that was mind-bending for me. It's like, oh, it's not about how smart you are from an academic standpoint. It's how capable you are to take that information and then go create something with it. That has absolutely propelled me in my business. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I don't sell products and I don't sell services. I sell outcomes and value. I want my clients to understand I'm not coming in to do a corporate training day with you. I'm coming in to unlock your potential. And that's that mindset shift that came from the academic component. And when they get on board with it, really, really magnificent things happen.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too. When you were sharing that answer, I was like, I just had this conversation recently.
Is that right?
I was presenting. Well, it looked a little different. I was presenting at a university, and I opened the floor up for questions. And first, students were hesitant, and I joked. I was like, "Listen, I was a professor, so I will call on you." I was like, I'll give someone, because I know that breaks the ice. Once they know and see how I'll actually answer and be transparent with it, people start shooting their hands up. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I'll give someone 10 seconds. And then after that, I'm going to start calling. And so the first person to answer asks a question, and all of a sudden, another hands start raising and calling them. And this one individual goes to me, so obviously you went to undergrad and grad, and I now have a degree or certification in every business area. I've talked on, the stages, the TED
Yeah.
stages, all that. And he goes, but you also talk to a lot of individuals, and what you do and the industry you broke into and where it is, podcasting and podcast consulting, when you started 4 years ago, there's credibility there and this and that. You don't learn that in college. So, all that being said, he goes, in a world, especially post COVID, where, getting that degree is not necessarily the same emphasis as pre COVID because people have seen certain things,
Mm,
pro or post college. What is your input on it? Especially since you work in an industry you did not learn how to do through going to college.
hmm.
And I was like, that's a really interesting question.
Right.
Because to your point, I leaned into it with the fact college is good to learn the fundamentals, to learn, and even lower in school, right? It teaches you certain data, certain information, being able to pull that out.
Hmm.
That those skills are really important. I said, but it's also about the networking, the opportunities you get to connect with people. And I said, then creating what you can create from those things is a very different thing. In grad school, you know, there were people in my program that went straight through. And I learned through my own experience of
Mm-hmm.
going and working and then coming back
Mm-hmm.
that, and even in college, like I was always the kid being like, okay, but how does this apply?
Yep.
Because for half of my college career, I was already working in professional
Yeah.
sports. So I had that, baseline. And for me, taking that into grad level where I was able to apply it, where I was looking at things going on in the space compared to those kids who went straight through, I said that is a disservice. In my eyes,
Mm-hmm.
no college should offer a straight through 3+1, 2+2, whatever you want to call it
Yeah.
program,
Yeah.
because that connectivity, grad school is meant for other things. And you saw, I mean, there was a gap. You saw it in the grad level when there were individuals who had come back or were working and taking their classes versus the students who didn't. But I also say every one of my experiences and life experiences, business experiences, education experiences led me to be able to do what I do now,
Mm-hmm.
having those understandings. But I said there are individuals who can be very successful without going to college. There are people that
Right.
if you want to, like my boyfriend served in the military. He is a chief engineer in the U.S. Coast Guard.
Yeah.
He enlisted and went into boot camp right after graduation.
Yeah.
His knowledge on engineering is some of the best I've spoke to. The way he
Mm-hmm.
problem solves, the way he
Right.
understands. I'm like, oh my god! Like I've worked with engineers before, and this is like a next level. So it's not for
Love that.
everyone, but it's understanding it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that came up for me while you were talking is this idea of, do you have some, world professional work experience that you can take what you're learning academically and sort of balance that off from a, what does this mean that I'm learning and how is it used even, right? If we want to go to that level. I went to college at night. I was working full time at a Fortune 50 company at the time and trying to raise a family. But what I was learning academically, I was able to see in my day job kind of a thing. And so I think that what I took away from that experience was significantly better than someone just coming out of high school and going right into school, staying on an academic track. And I think that's especially true to your point when we see the young people who go right through their bachelor's program into a master's or a PhD program without any practical work experience. So, and there are pros and cons. I don't want it to sound like I have a strong opinion about it either way. I'm just saying, the track that I went on where it was intermixed school and work, it was phenomenal for me.
And on that note, and to also kind of wrap up with our last question, because I can't believe the time is
I
flying
know,
by.
right?
But as it always does when we talk, if someone listening right now wants to lean into more effectiveness and alignment in their role or their team, what's one concrete experiment or practice you'd invite them to run over the next week? And how should they measure that impact?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a simple answer for that. When I think about that kind of question and what that arc might look like, the big picture for me looks like you really need to understand yourself first. We
Mhm.
start with a psychometric assessment so we get a really clear picture of who you are. When we know that, we understand what your communication preferences are, what your communication style is. We understand how you think, how you process information, how you make decisions, how you show up in conflict, how you create and operationalize trust. All of that stuff becomes available for you to understand who you are. Then we look at your team, your function, your organization, and we say, what do they need from you? And that's what makes this work so interesting. There's nothing prescriptive about this. It's very, very diagnostic up front because as an example, and I'll just pull these out. If you're a leader in a technical environment, let's say that you lead a team of developers, what they need from you is a little bit of vision and strategy and a lot of hands on coaching, development, problem solving, shoulder to shoulder kind of work. If you're working with a group of product engineers or product managers, they don't want you in their business at all, right? They want you as a resource that they can soundboard. They want you to block and tackle for them, when they're pitching a new idea or asking for investment dollars. And so the question from the leader standpoint is, which of those versions of a leader are you naturally? Which do you like and prefer? And then does that align to the organization that you're leading? Now, I don't look at it from a disqualifying standpoint, meaning if that wasn't your preference, if that's not your
Mhm.
strength, that you're not eligible for the role. What it does mean is it's going to be significantly harder for you to be successful in the role. I'm okay with hard. I'm not afraid of hard. Most of my clients aren't either. We're very capable of doing and willing to do hard things. But you got to ask yourself a question: is this where I want to be? Because while you're stretching and adopting to be who you need to be as a leader for that group, you're not in your what I call natural habitat, which is where you're going to excel. And so I don't know, again, to your question, I don't know that there's a specific experiment to run other than be aware of what your natural preferences are and then check in with your team to find out if that's actually what they need.
I love that. Jeff, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. Our website, ibridged.com, and it's ibridged with a D. It's a past tense of crossing over, right? It's retrospectively looking at where you came from. That's what iBridged is, and then celebrating where you are now after making that transition. So iBridge is a good place to go. There's a link there to schedule time on my calendar. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. I think there's still a link there for you to be able to schedule time. And then we had a podcast called iBridge Leadership Stories. We have transformed that into transformational leadership, the Transformational Leadership Podcast. We launched the initial episode 2 weeks ago, and our first guest episode is launching tomorrow. So you can find that on YouTube if you'd like to follow there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jeff, for all of your insight and coming back for round two as a guest.
Olivia, thanks so much for your generosity and the invitation to come back. I'll come back anytime.
Well, you're always welcome. And a fun fact before I go into a few of the key takeaways, that as we were talking and you were talking about growth, that it like sunk in is the journey since 2023. I forget if it got mentioned on that interview or not, but that was I was the first podcast that you were ever a guest on.
Hmm.
And we then worked together to get you on other
Yeah.
podcasts and keeping in touch and following your journey and now having a podcast and getting in this phase since 2023 where we started and now here, it's just so rewarding in the growth, and now having you back and doing an episode 2 has been so rewarding, and I've loved seeing that journey for you. And that being said, a few of our key takeaways from today's conversation include: get out of the revenue mindset as quickly as possible for your business. As Jeff mentioned in the over one of the many overarching themes of today's conversation, but leading with passion, leading with purpose, and relationship first and value first. And but also understanding, like, yes, when we all start businesses, we're coming from that revenue mindset, and like
Yeah.
we're not trying to tell you otherwise. Even Jeff said it. However, try to get away from that as quickly as possible because it will suck you in, and then its grip will get hard. So I loved that advice, as well as what is the gap between where you are today and where you want to be. And that's something I want to challenge everyone with as well today of what Jeff brought up is I want you to sit down for a few minutes and evaluate and think and reflect, maybe even journal about where you are today and where you want to be. And understanding, and I love this analogy, that no two bridges are the same, as well as how are you providing values to others in work, in your life, as well as what difference did you're asking yourself, what difference did your work make for your client, and understanding that is your value proposition. You can be in business for 5 years and you can evaluate and grow, but do check-ins with yourself. Ask yourself, what is the difference that my work did and the results my client gave? And as Jeff mentioned as well, you can straight up ask a client. Ask them. They'll tell you. And that could give you a value proposition you didn't even realize. And lastly, the platinum rule. Treat others the way they want to be treated. This was a great episode with our top-notch guest, Jeff Harnois. Thank you for listening and have a successful day.